autobiographical to begin with, and I think by understanding my story, then you can understand a lot more of where my art comes from. And my journey of art kind of started, I went to art school, but I went the same route. I was a graphic designer, I went the whole corporate route, and the same thing. And it was great to be practical, but it really was just that. It was a career, it wasn't creative necessarily, and it didn't really feed me, but I kind of bought into the whole world success, climb corporate ladder thing that a lot of people tend to, that's what we're told, right? The American dream, right? So, starting in my 30s, I found myself, I was at a corporation. I was doing really well. I was, at that point, the head of a web development department, and they were going under. They filed bankruptcy. They were in their third round of layoffs, and I had poured my heart and soul into this. I tied my identity into it basically, and I thought I was going to be the big corporate girl, and then I was pregnant, and suddenly now I was a mom. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can be the corporate girl and the mom, and I can be everything, right? But we find out it doesn't so much work that way. At least I did. I got burnt out very fast. I was laid off. Decided to go into consulting, and ended up working more than I ever did when I was working full time. It burnt me out. And in that same time, I started getting sick. I was draining my adrenal glands. I was just not feeling so good, and more pain. But at that same time, I was also in the best shape of my life. I was working out, I was running, I was doing all kinds of things. But I had a bad pregnancy, I had all this stress going on, and it just kind of created this perfect storm that really just ate away at me. And it was like I broke. And it got to a point that I was sitting in my office, my at-home office, because I was doing consulting. I had this really huge project that I was proud I had this project. I was proud I had this client. It was a big client. They had a big name university attached to it. My identity was there. I made it, And I'm looking at the screen, and I was just so exhausted. I just couldn't even focus on this coding and on this project that I just couldn't go on. It was like, I am done. And it was just that point of realizing, like, I can't do this. I was so overwhelmed, and I was so miserable, and I was so sick. And I just couldn't go on another second that way. And I had this vision of myself just hanging from two ropes. I had the one over here and the one over there, and I'm just stressed. And you realize, okay, you're trying to move ahead. You can't go either way if you're holding on both ropes. You can't hold on to here for safety and security and want to move up here, because you're not going anywhere. You're stuck until you decide, until you commit to letting go of the past, or letting go of, for me, this identity of me as this career woman, finding my value in the outside world. You can't move. And so there I was just like that, and that was my breaking point. And so it was a huge step for me to let go of this security and validation, really, of me as this person who look, I made something of myself. I always grew up, and I was always the quiet one, or I was always I had the really cute, pretty girlfriend, and I was the one that was the shadow. And so it's like, hey, I'm over here, listen to me, but and so I think I craved that fact that, look, I'm here too, I have value, but I was looking at it for it in the wrong places. And so I had it so tied up in that external that when I had to let go of that external, because I had to, because I was sick, it threw me for a major loop. And I for a long time, I call my 30s kind of my wilderness time, and I think because I really felt like I was stripped down and in this holding pattern of trying to figure out what's next. You know, my body is giving up on me. I feel like crap. I mean, and nobody, all the tests would come back, nothing's wrong. You must just be tired, little baby, And it wasn't that, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And so I spent a long time just really having to sit with myself, and it was very lonely. And you start to realize who's there for you and who's not. It's nice, I was with a group of ladies once in a group, and I thought, okay, these women are my friend, and they knew I was sick, and they say to me, well, what can we do for you? Can we, bring you casseroles? Can we do this? Like, I really would just love somebody to come and just sit. They were all dead son. They could make me a casserole, but they couldn't sit and have coffee with me. And I thought that was huge and sad. And it really gave me a heart for women, because I think we all have our time in our lives, whether I think for a lot of women it's maybe empty nest or whatever, but I think not just women, men too, but I speak from a woman's standpoint, so I say women, where we go through this kind of, is this really where I want to be? Is this who I am? Is this, and you kind of do this sort of self-inventory, and when you find out you're like not on track, or you can't control that track for that matter, it really throws you. And so I had to really spend a long time working through that. And I was so sick, I had no choice. I was stuck in my body, and I had nothing I could do about it. And so I started, I did a lot of journaling, and then journaling turned into kind of journaling along with, sketching, sketch journaling and things like that, just kind of really pouring through my thoughts and working that. And then, it just kept getting more and more as because, things would work in the search for whatever the deal was, and then things went, so it did this very big up and down roller coaster, and just quite a ride. But in that process, though, I really, when you strip away everything you thought you were and get rid of all the external, and all you're left with is you and nothing else, it's just you and that internal spiritual whatever, and that's all that's there. And so you got to sit with it and come to terms and just really mull it. And that's where I went with my art, and it really was a healing process for me. And so what happens for me now, as I continue this journey, because I'm still sick, and frankly, 2 days ago, you guys are the first public people to know this, I just was diagnosed 2 days ago with Lyme disease.
Say again?
Lyme disease. After 10 years of seeing tons and tons, I can't count how many doctors and how many dollars I have spent. First time in 10 years, 2 days ago, I got a test result that actually had an answer. And I went and thought, okay, here we go again, another couple $100 down the drain, and another round of, here's more of my blood, here's more fluids. And I thought for sure nothing. She's like, I'm sorry to tell you, Western blot, 5 of 5. I think there's 5 lines on the Western blot, all 5. It was like screaming Lyme disease, no doubt. And so now we're gearing up for another round of tests that to make sure what co-infections, because there's different things, and then have to detox. I found out my body doesn't detox properly, so there's all these things that pretty much says I'm sick, I'm going to be sick for a very long time, so you better be okay with that. And you know what? I think this whole journey has prepared me for that answer, and I'm okay with that. I know it's going to be a long battle, but I've been battling. Every morning I get up and I have to choose that I'm going to fight again today to want to live. Basically, honest to God, I mean, sometimes pain and you name it, there's so many, the longer list is. And part of that is my ritual with my art. Because for me, that art ritual is a very healing way, and it's a connection, and it's a prayer-like meditative connection as well. It just, I don't think I would have coped as well if I didn't have that in my life to help me think through things, because you're facing it, but you're occupying your mind with something, and it's teaching you, and it's a give and take, and it's a connection, but it takes you outside of crap, you know? And so that's where it really, it's honestly, it's saved my life. Well, that sounds really dramatic, but in a way it really has, because it's helped me keep that perspective and that centering and that hope in what's important. And so that's basically where I'm at. So I guess I didn't need this all that much today. I didn't even get on a roll, right?
Starting it.
Yeah. So, that's my story, and I really have become passionate about the fact that art builds bridges, art heals, art communicates, art transcends communication. It brings people together, brings communities together, and it really can be the conduit for a lot of things, and so can all the arts, not just visual arts, so can music, so can writing, and it's just, we need that in our schools and in our lives, and it's just so important, and I think women need that, and I think it brings women together, and that's another thing I learned is women need each other, men need each other too in their own way. I can't speak for that, but we need each other. We're made for, we shouldn't be alone, it's not healthy, and so I think just those are my big takeaways from all this, and I hope art teaches you that in your own way as well. And so I'm from that, because that's very depressing, even though I don't mean it that way.
I just want to quickly interject and say, Cecilia and I, when we first met Rebecca after hearing her story, were so incredibly impressed by her spirit and her journey and her ability to turn all of that stuff, all those emotions and all of that angst, and wanting to know more about herself and get questions and turn all of that into this beautiful, incredible, powerful artwork. And it's really just going to go into the medium a little bit. It's encaustics, and you probably smelled the beeswax already, but it's layers upon layers upon layers of wax, and there's a lot of skill and know-how, and there's beauty in that control, but there's also so much beauty in the chaos as well. And just knowing Rebecca and getting to know her and seeing, her battle, but also the beauty that is created because of it has been so inspiring on her personal relationship with, art as a means of catharsis. And, you wouldn't necessarily know all the background coming in, and looking at these pieces standing in front of them, but you feel it, so we're just, thank you for sharing all of that. And she's going to go a little bit into the medium and her physical process.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Do you have questions as you go along?
Sure. You know what? Since I'm in an in-between phase, yeah.
Well, since we're talking about the challenges of the illness and the learning about the illness and
Right.
the terms from what it was, and you know, when you said the art was one of the few places where you could be okay. Now, knowing what you now know, and I know it's only a couple of days later, but when you look at one of these pieces, like when I look at the one behind you, I see there's things about the colors and things about the shapes and so forth that speak to me that have probably nothing to do with what you were through.
And you know what? That's what's amazing about art, I think.
Yeah. Does that take you back to the moment or the day or the week that you were
Sometimes,
creating?
yeah. If there was a really strong,
whether it was a feeling good week or a feeling crappy week?
yeah, I could say, yeah. And you know what? I could have gone in there feeling really crappy, but once you get in the process, you're outside of yourself, and it doesn't matter anymore. I have been in most severe pain, and sometimes the most beautiful art comes out of those worst days. It's really bizarre like that. I mean, I could be standing there in agony and I just want one more layer, because I'm more about the art than I am about me.
And that might be one reason why the Encaustic process was attractive.
It very much, though I think I am very much attracted to the process of Encaustic because of the process itself as well. It's because I was trained as an illustrator, and so I have done very much across all spectrum. I'm very familiar with a lot of the mediums and have used them, but it's the flexibility and the process. I used to be a very, I was an illustrator, a very rigid, literal drawing, painting, and I struggled to loosen up. Well, anybody who's played with hot wax and put fire to it knows it's going to go where it wants to go. So it's a huge process of letting go and letting it happen, and that is a huge lesson in life of letting go and surrendering, and you learn that every day when you play with it, if you let it, Did I answer your question? I'm sorry.
And more.
Yeah.
I had a friend, a dear friend, she knew she was dying, and in the last 3 months of her life, I learned so much from her. And she was an artist and did abstract art, and she painted up to the end. I mean, she was, really in bad shape, but she was still painting. And I told her, Anne, these paintings are the best you have ever done. And she said, because I'm doing it for me.
Yep.
Not to sell, not for anybody else, but for myself. And they were the most beautiful paintings. If you let go and you just do it for you, that's when it's just fabulous.
You're in a
And
voice
they
just
all
comes out and
sold.
shines.
They all sold.
I believe it, because you know what? It's
Yes.
the energy is transferred into that.
Yes.
And if you're too controlled with it, the art shows it.
Yeah.
And so when you buy an original piece of art, you're buying a piece of that artist because that artist's energy is in that paint, literally.
Exactly.
And that's what's kind of cool about it. And it may speak to you in a completely different way than the artist intended, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's what's so awesome about, and that's why it transcends language and whatever. And that's why actually I don't sometimes like to, I don't like naming my paintings. I find that hard because I don't want to limit them, but I know that I need to name them because some people have a trouble connecting in there if it's not, but I can't go to a gallery and go, okay, I'm title 1, I'm title 2, I'm title 23. Yeah, it gets hard. So you have to really kind of think of the business side of it, and that's why I do name them, but I don't necessarily like talking too much individually about them other than the process or maybe where I was in it a little bit at the time, because your journey is your journey with that painting, and that's how you're going to connect with it, not how my story connects with it. So,
And my big thing is, art does not have to match the couch. That's my favorite line.
for sure.
That's a good one.
Anybody else? Sorry. Pick up my glasses. All right. I didn't want to be distracting, but I will need them for the next part. So I left this out so you guys could be nosy and just see what, before you guys all sat down and smell it, because it is very tactile in that way, full senses. So what I have here is what makes these. It has to be on a hard surface, otherwise it can crack. What I do is I start, this is raw beeswax. This was naturally refined beeswax, I guess not raw. But so I buy this in bulk because I go through a lot of it. And between this is Damar resin crystals. It comes from trees, and it's hard and sticky when melt it down. And then here's another, it's a Pernuba wax. I mix ratios of these three together to create the base medium. And these two little ones here are what makes this harder. And what makes this harder is what makes it durable and lasts. It lasts. And different artists have different preferences for how or what. There's a lot of different recipes for it, but that's what I use. And I'll make a big vat of it, and I'll pour it out, and it ends up my base medium. And what I do, now this one does not have a thermometer on it. This is very hot, so don't have to try this. 200 degrees hot. You have to keep that between 180, sometimes 160, depends on the brand. If you buy it pre, sometimes they'll say a little cooler. And again, this is a preference thing, how hot you want it. And it can go up to about 220 before it starts smoking. If it smokes, it's bad. And you want to, because this resin stuff creates toxic fumes. And so you need to have ventilation when you use this, because you will get sick. And I sometimes wear a mask with filters in it if I'm doing something. And right now I'm in a studio space that has a lot open, and I'm still pushing it away, because if you're on top of it, it comes up your nose. And you don't want that, because you'll feel it, and it will cause nerve damage. It will cause things that are not fun. I'm all about safety in my studio. Usually I don't just grab things. If I'm cleaning off the palette or something, I have there's wax on it, and I will take like a napkin and I'll rub it around there to clean off my palette. This has a bunch of colors because I just pulled it out of the back and brought it up here for you. What you do, these boards are prepped, so what I do is I start with taper on the edges because I like my edges clean, and then layers of clear wax to start. So I was planning on having an open pack, just to show you real quick. Do that. Thought I'd be better prepared. Sorry.
So that's on canvas?
That is, it's a panel, yeah. It's a wooden panel, so you can use a piece of plywood, like birch, 3/4 inch plywood, but it is always wood or something hard and porous. It always has to be somewhat porous or it's not going to stick.
So what's on top of that now?
That is clear wax right now on top of that. So it started out, I gessoed it white, or actually carried it over there for me. And then I put 2 layers of base wax to start out. And different artists have different techniques for starting. I do that because clear wax is cheaper than the pigmented wax, and it gives me something to go back to always without staining my base canvas, because here's you can buy them pre-done as well on Masonite, and they have a nice surface. Encaustic Board makes them, and they make big panels like those 2 over there are pre-done ones by the same company, and they're very expensive, so I prefer to make them myself. So what I start every one, and I would take it, and you just rub it along. I don't want to burn myself. Like that, and see, there's my first sort of layer. Now normally, I use a torch. I'm not going to use that tonight, I'm just there for prettiness. A lot of people also use a heat gun. Hopefully I don't get a fuse, but then you take it and you're literally just running it along the surface without burning your fingers. and you're doing it, I have it on low so you can hear me, but you'd be doing it so it just kind of creates like a slick look to the surface. You don't want to totally melt it. Do it real quick. And so it just gives this wetness, real quick wetness to it. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. And you're smoothing it out. I can do it quick before I go around. And then usually if I'm doing something really small like this, I'll have a bunch of them laid out and I'll kind of go in successive order, because you want this to cool enough that when you put your next layer on, it's warm, but it's not like so hot that when you start doing it, the hotter it is, the quicker it turns to mud. And so these are things you learn with wax, is timing. A lot of it's patience and timing and willing to see where it goes. So I paint very intuitively. A lot of it, like I'll go in and like I said, I have maybe something I'm thinking about or whatever, but you know, I'll play with color palettes, or maybe I'll have something I'm very inspired by nature and color combos, or just, you know, details of the world, or things like, even I love the cycles of life and death and decay and how there's things that fascinate me that in abstract terms, sometimes I'll pull on as a thought concept in what I'm doing. But it really comes down to the emotion of what's in here that wants to get out in that day. And so I don't really have too much of, other than maybe a color or a technique that, and sometimes I start and it's totally, by the time it's done, whatever's under there is under there and you have no clue it's under there and something totally different's on top. It's just, I go in with an open mind of letting the art take me where it wants to go because it's going to. And that's what's beautiful about the wax is it's that surrender, that let go, and that's a constant thing I need to hear. I need to be willing. I have this control and this drive and this push that I gotta keep tempering. And some of that's good, but some of it you can't control everything in life. And so this teaches me that, you know, to back off and just let the beautifulness happen, basically, you know. So then I'd go in and I'd go start here the other way, and I just run another layer. And so it's there. Same thing. So see, it's very repetitive. I don't do it too much, but I could get it to flat. Now, in the process here, you see, right now you can kind of, I don't know if the light's catching it, but you can see there's little ridges, lines. You can play up, depending how cold or hot you let it get. If you let it, you can play up the texture of the wax, or you can get it down to where it's really smooth. And to help that process along, one of my best friends is a little razor blade, and jitters, and it's not, you guys don't scare me, it's just I have jitters. But you, so, you know, it just, you kind of, and it's a very tactile touch because you so easily could just totally put a hole right in the middle of it, and I've done that, and it really stinks when you do, but you just keep going. And see, it's really thin, this is clear, so I can put it right back in there.
It's like I see tape.
Exactly, make it real pretty and smooth. And then I might think, okay, you know, what am I going to do? Now, when I do demos, they really look, can't promise anything here. Now, so these are the different colors, and they come in different bricks. Here's a big one of black. They're very pigmented. And what I can do is put them in these little bowls with a lot of the clear, depending how saturated I want it, and so I can extend the color, because these are really expensive. It's like, you know, a solid thing of very expensive oil paint, basically. And, or I could use it solid if I really wanted, but I really could. They come in opaque and translucent colors. So again, it's knowing your mediums, your paints, and how they interact and how they behave when they're heated up or with each other, based on, you know, opaque, or whether some of them will float to the top, some of them will mix with the others, and just those things that you learn. And so it's very chemistry oriented, basically. But so I'm gonna, you know, this is pretty, just sitting here, sometimes I'll do this. So I'll just run it along there. I'm just gonna run there. It's making texture, which is fine. So I'm gonna just textures. We're going to go with it, right?
So the paint's in a wax base too?
Exactly. It's all in a wax base. And you can make your own colors with dry pigments, or you can buy them in the bricks, or you can take oil paints and set them on, well, like the equivalent of coffee filters, and let all that linseed, or whatever the oil is in the paints in the bottles, overnight just kind of seep out so that it's more of a solid paint itself, and then you can mix it in to that, and you gotta be careful not to do too much, because you don't want too much oil in there, it gets sticky, and it does, so it's a learning process. Like I said, everything in this is very chemistry oriented. Now, okay, I really want to use my torch, because I don't want to burn the table, so, because this is just what I feel, I learned the sensitivity of the touch of the torch, and so it's quicker for me, and I like to play with fire. And when it's cold, sometimes it will flare up like that, so I need to just, it takes a minute sometimes to, so I'll just lick it. I'm just licking the surface with it, and it's really going strong right now, but I normally wouldn't, but I'm just getting this done. And there we go, it's off. And so, just perfectly sealed it, and it's there. Now, sometimes what I'll do between layers is seal it with another clear, so I'm protecting that and can go back to that clear without disturbing the under. Now in here there's a really cool little bubbly pattern. I didn't expect that, but I thought that's cool. Maybe I'll play on that. That's where I say the art tells me what it wants to do, and I don't mean it like speaks in my head, but maybe it does, but but so I just let it do that, and it's a meditative give and take process along the way. And one of the fun things I love to do, and a lot of these, you'll see these little bubbles, and how I do sometimes these bubbles is either on, there's a couple different ways I do, but this is one of them. So I have a color here. I will take, now I don't want to splatter too much because you don't want to wear wax, do you? And just kind of, like I said, try and splatter clear in there. There's bubbles on there now. Not a lot, but enough to get my point across. Go another layer.
So you just set it in between every layer, right?
I have to set it between every layer, and
then you've also incorporated, I've seen you do pieces where you've incorporated old photographs and book pages and numbers.
yes,
And you'll even like scrape after. Or
exactly,
scrape in.
exactly, yeah. Okay, so there's bubbles. It's hard to see, but yeah. So what happens is it pushes away the color, and so it left those bubbles. And that's a very basic level of how I'm creating some of these bubbles. And so what Kristen is saying is a lot of I don't think I have any in the show.
Just barely.
Okay, that one barely, yeah. There are a few things in there, but I will collage, because I love story and I love history, and I just, the whole reclaiming of something that was once forgotten in garbage and bringing value back to it, and almost a redeeming nature of that. I love putting that back into my art symbolically, and plus, like I said, the story, but there's just so many reasons. And so, to do that, I don't have the tools here, is I would put that down, and I would take a piece of wax paper over the top, and then I have like a brayer like you would use for printing. I'd rub that in there, or with a spoon, I'd rub that in there, pull the wax paper away, and fuse it then, and then I could go over more layers, and depending how big it is, that's how you do it. And then, again, I could, if I had multiple color layer, here, let me do a multiple color layer. I have this solid white here. I'm just gonna go over it real quick. Pretty thick, but that's all right. Hell, it's really warm. Fire. All right, so speaking of, it's too much, it's jiggling still. Normally I don't do that. Okay, the white loves to create this really cool webbing effect sometimes over other colors, and that's one of those things I know. And so I see that there, and that's fun to make happen. It's fun when you know it's going, but it still has its own way of doing things. So that's there to begin with, but that blue is still under there. So I can very carefully, when it's not as hot,
moving
And
around.
sorry about that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how I'm getting that layered depth. Is this, and sometimes it could be hundreds of layers in these. It's just you
So
go.
that's like 3 or 4 layers that you have on that one. So
At
what
most,
about
yeah.
the piece to your right? Like how many layers?
This
are
one
you-
here or right
Yeah,
here?
yeah.
This one here has a special. This is actually a multimedia piece, and so I'm sure it has hundreds of layers because what happens is I will do that and maybe I'll go over it again and do it again. I mean, it's a constant back and forth, and it's not always a, okay, I'm done now, you know. So there can be hundreds, and I will sometimes end up with this big bowl of wax that I've scraped off, and I will melt that down again if I can keep colors together, or I'll use it as a background for a new painting because it's still usable. It's just stuff I've scraped, but it will be a mountain, you know, just sitting on my table of excess wax that I've scraped away, because that's just as much as the putting on process is taking off. So this painting here, these colors in here is actually shellac burn. So I've taken furniture or whatever shellac, whatever you use shellac for. I think it's furniture, among other things. And I painted it on here, outside, where I can't burn down the house or building. It's not the house. And while it's still wet, I will let it on fire. And it creates these bubble effects in there. And it's really fun. But if you do it too much, you create a big puddle of yuck. And so that's another one of those learning. But it's all learning. You know, you do it once bad, you go back at it again, and next time you know better.
How do you stop the fire? I mean, you
It
want
goes
to-
out. Eventually it does go out on its own.
So you let it play out?
I let it play out, yeah, and stand out of the way. Make sure it's not too windy. You can also do it when it's dry, and it is a little more controlled, but it's not as dramatic with its bubbles, but it's still fun. And you can tint that, so it, like I probably put orange on those to make it more dramatically bold. Even though it comes in like amber, it comes in different hues of ambers and brownish, sorta, reddish. And so I've done some in the past where I think I've tinted it black. You could put like certain things over the top, like powders, mica powders, things like that, that kind of interact with it as well. And so after I was done with that, then I went over again with the wax. So it is actually back in there. It's not that final layer, and it's still in there. And then here you can, if you look real close, there is like unlegible writing or whatever. I love to make market making. It says absolutely nothing, but to me it's just that innate. You have your own like gestures that are unique to you, and everybody tends to be maybe like circles or your body. You just tend to gravitate towards your own language, basically. It's not even language, but so I just love that, seeing that even in other artists. So that's what it is. I felt it needed something, so it was fun to just kind of create those like gestures, and that's done in oil stick. And then I would fuse it the same way I did that. I just do a real quick lick. A graphite paper here, I can take that, put it on there, scrape away. I did that with this here. Is like the paper with the gold leaf, but that is a copper finish, and I've taken a spoon, you can see I've scraped into it a little bit, but it was a rubbing and then fusing. It's so, there's so many, one of my favorite stores between our store is the hardware store, because the hardware store has so much fun. You can use tar underneath. I've done, so that one back there has with the people, I'm sorry, and it looks like underwater and they're about to swim. Those, I think, I want to say it's either a cement or like a grout type of finish. Like, yeah, there's texture in there. That stuff came from the hardware store, and there's burlap under there and paper. So I guess there is collage.
Rebecca, understanding that the process and the materials are going to take you where they want to go.
Right.
Do you also start out thinking, I'm going to do something with, I don't know, I see this, and I think of a copper horizon with a blue ground, or on top of a
yeah.
black streak through a bunch of something?
They
or the-
started with purple underneath.
Yeah.
And,
So you have some idea of what you want it to be, but you have to be open to letting it be what it's gonna be.
yeah, and sometimes,
It's
yeah,
just-
because like I'll play with color palettes, and so maybe I'm drawn to certain colors. And so, what'll happen then is I may start with those, but then something else go, oh, you know what, it really needs it, and I just let it go where it does. And you know what, I don't, even if it's collage under there, if it's collage under there, sometimes it may get lost. Maybe I'll spread back so you see it again, maybe I won't. But that energy is still in there, and it's part of that process. It's just, you just don't.
I may not know how it got to what it is.
Right,
But I see
exactly.
that it got to what it is, and then I can appreciate it that.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. So I mean, that's pretty much the gist of it. I mean, there's all kinds of tools. You can use irons. I don't use this all that much, but you can use irons. There's this you heat up and it can make marks. You can actually use a brush. I mean, there are people who do very realistic encaustic paintings. For me, I'm painting my emotion, and so that's where I feel the creativity coming out, as opposed to trying to paint a scene, even though there are scenes very inspiring to me. But for me right now it's just the poetry of my emotion coming out on that canvas, basically. Yeah.
Now, how did you start to work with glass? Why, what?
You know, a funny thing is I can't even remember. I'm pretty sure I saw Encaustic and fell in love with it at some point, and then, but it intimidated me because there was fire involved.
Right.
And once I got over that,
And then how did you get into it?
I just taught myself. I was very familiar with other painting mediums, so it was just a matter of bringing it across and getting over the fear of just digging in and trying it.
Right.
So once I got over the fear of things are hot and you burn yourself, I was very happy.
I remember when something like this at the other one you had, it was that, without the shellac, it was that kind of that color. And if you remember, I called you over and said,
Yes.
I see a figure
Yes.
over there in the
Right,
light.
yes.
And you looked at it, I said, did you draw that? You said, no.
Sometimes that happens. There's one in the corner that has a face that I just went with it. It starts showing up. I figured he wants to be there, he can be there. Let him have it. Stay back there. You know, I don't necessarily go with trying to put a face in or a figure in, but when they show up, I'll encourage it. And like I said, go where it wants to go.
What does the word encaustic mean?
It's a Greek word from, it's encaustic coat. I don't know if it comes from, it's a Greek medium. It's a very ancient medium, so I don't exactly know if it's like sizing. I probably have it on my website. If there is a definition, I have it on my, yes.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you.
I remember when something like this at the other one you had, it was that, without the shellac, it was that kind of that color. And if you remember, I called you over and said,
Yes.
I see a figure
Yes.
over there in the light.
Right, yes.
And you looked at it, I said, did you draw that? You said, no.
Sometimes that happens. There's one in the corner that has a face that I just went with it. It starts showing up. I figured he wants to be there, he can be there. Let him have it. Stay back there. You know, I don't necessarily go with trying to put a face in or a figure in, but when they show up, I'll encourage it. And like I said, go where it wants to go.
What does the word encaustic mean?
It's a Greek word from, it's encaustic coat. I don't know if it comes from, it's a Greek medium. It's a very ancient medium, so I don't exactly know if it's like sizing. I probably have it on my website. If there is a definition, I have it on my, yes.